some point, a female nurse came in my room in ICU. I don't know what she did on the other side of my bed, but we must have got into an argument, and she reached over and clipped something on my IVs, and I was terrified. And I turned to her as she was leaving the room, and I said, "Why are you trying to kill me?" So the timeline of my story begins in January 2025. I just got a new prescription for my eyeglasses, and about 5 or 6 months later, I noticed that things just weren't looking as clear as they used to be. And I thought that was kind of weird, because you usually can get about a year out of them before you need to get a new prescription. And things just weren't, both distance and up close, because I was wearing progressive glasses, kind of like a bifocal. And both of them, they were just kind of funky to me, so I wanted to go back in and check. But before I had a chance to go back into the ophthalmologist, I had an appointment with an audiologist to check on my hearing, because at that point I was already deaf in my right ear. But I wanted to see how deaf I was, basically the percentage of what that was. And plus I was wearing hearing aids, and I wanted to talk to her about that. I could barely hear anything out of that right ear when I would solo it with an earbud. Anyways, after the test, she told me that one-sided hearing loss was not very common, and she wanted me to go see an ENT. So, looking back, she probably knew something was up. I don't know if she knew that there was definitely a tumor in there, but she probably knew something was up. So I was finally able to get an appointment with the ENT about a month later. He looked in my ear, nose, and throat and said, "Everything looks healthy." And I thought to myself, what do you mean healthy? I'm deaf in that ear. And then I began to tell him about my neurological issues that I've been dealing with. And he's like, "That has nothing to do with your hearing. I want you to go get a head scan." And then he actually said, "It could be a tumor, or it may not." So that was concerning. And so before I had a chance to get a CT scan scheduled, I had an eye appointment for that updated prescription. And the doctor looked at my eyes and found hemorrhages on the back of my eyes. Now, my blood pressure was about 160 over, I don't remember exactly. So we kind of just chalked it up to high blood pressure. But the one thing I did not check mark on the little paperwork that they give you before an eye exam is, are you experiencing flashes of light or floaties? And I don't know if I was or not for sure, but if I was, I thought, okay, that's something that needs to be corrected with a new prescription. And I definitely experienced it that following week, and it was very concerning. So I called the eye doctor back up, and I said, "Yeah, I am seeing flashes of light." And she said, "That's not something to mess with. That could be, a detached retina. Can you come in today?" And so I did. Different doctor, different camera, and this time they found what was called papilledema, and that is swelling or pressure on the optic nerve. And they wanted me to go to the emergency room, so I went there, and they did a CT scan, and that's when they found the tumor. So it was this huge ripple effect over about 7 months that kind of started with the vision issues. And I always say it's wild how everything is connected. So kids, listen to your body. If something doesn't seem right, go see a doctor. Yes, as I've mentioned, vision issues where the eyeglasses weren't feeling right visually is what got my attention. But also in 2022, I started having some neurological issues down the right side of my body. And I called it my episode. If I would be sitting for 20 or 30 minutes, whether it's at work or driving by truck, and then I just get up and start walking, I would start to get like a dull headache, feel weird all over my body, but mostly in my head. My right leg would get weak and wobbly, and my right foot would smack the ground. I think the correct medical term is foot drop. And regardless of how much I focused on rolling that right foot, I could not get it to roll like a normal walk. It would just smack the ground during those episodes. So the best thing for me to do was to just sit down and let it subside, and it would last anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour on most occasions. Sometimes longer, sometimes less. September 10th was the day that I went to the ER and they discovered the tumor. So they kept me overnight, and while they did whatever they had to do to find out what kind of tumor it was, before they took me to a room, and after the initial CT scan, they took me back for a torso scan, and then they took me to my room. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, they took me back for a full body MRI. And if you've never had an MRI, be prepared for it to be very loud. That was my first. I've had 2 more since then, and if they can give you music to listen to for that 30 minutes, definitely listen to music. I listened to Rush 2112, and it calmed me, and it made that 30 minutes go by pretty quick. It was wild. My legs were like trembling, as if I was nervous, but I wasn't nervous when I first laid down on the table, that is. And the nurse asked me if I was claustrophobic, and I said, I don't think so, but I guess we'll find out. And then she said, you gotta stop shaking. It's gonna affect the MRI image. And I said, I'm trying. Just get the rush in my ears, and that should help, hopefully. And I shit you not, as soon as that whoosh in the beginning intro of 2112, if you know, you know, my legs stopped shaking almost instantly. The power music is very amazing, and it truly calmed me. Anyway, the next morning, the doctor's PA came in and said that it was a benign acoustic neuroma tumor, otherwise known as a vestibular schwannoma. It's a mouthful. Weird word, but that's what it's called. We had figured out that it was probably benign, just because after 3 years of those neurological symptoms I was having, it probably would have taken me out or just gotten way, way worse if it was malignant. But it was still a huge relief to hear that, directly from the PA's mouth, that it was benign. And I'd say within about a couple hours, I was discharged from Kettering Main Hospital, and Dr. Patel, who works there, had referred me to Dr. Wu at the James at OSU. The first appointment I had was with a radiologist at Soin Hospital in Beaver Creek, Ohio. And due to the size of the tumor, it was like the size of a golf ball, 4.26 centimeters, he recommended that I have the surgery because it was just too big to do radiation. And that's the day that I found out that radiation takes the same amount of time that it takes to shrink the tumor as it took to actually grow the tumor. So assuming the tumor started growing in 2016, or right around that time, which is the math from my first sign of something kind of off with my hearing, looking at almost a decade, definitely more than 9 years of growth, it would take 9 years from that first radiation treatment to get rid of it. Side effects, from what I've read, are headaches, hair loss, nausea, vision, hearing changes, as well as like difficulty with memory and concentration. And I would say that 9 years of that would definitely have caused me to experience all that. So no thanks. So that's something to consider too, in case you're ever given a choice between surgery and radiation. I don't know for sure, because everyone reacts differently to it. But I would say many years of radiation would age you much faster than surgery. So if you only need 1 or 2 years of radiation, it's probably okay, and better than going under the knife, as they say. But if it's going to be many, many years of radiation, I would consider the surgery over that. Well, it definitely surprised my friends and family. I think I told the majority of the people through a text, because I knew that by calling people I'd be on the phone a lot longer than I had the time for. Plus, I was a bit emotional. I'd probably start off with contacting all my closest friends and family and my boss. I did have 2 friends about a week apart say to me, sometimes they keep you awake for the brain surgery, so they can talk to you and ask you if you can feel things or see things. I'm like, well, that's not what you want to hear being a possibility when you find out that you have to have brain surgery. It was just a strange thing to have two friends, a week apart, say this pretty much the same thing. But at my first consultation, October 9th, with Dr. Wu, I asked him about that. And he said, well, yeah, that's a thing. There are certain brain surgeries that do require you to be awake, but yours will not be, because yours is much more complicated, and it's going to be about 10 to 12 hours long. So you'll be out the whole time. And I can't express my relief to hear that. That took away all my anxiety, all my fear of the worst things happening while being awake, whether that's feeling them in my head or just the fear alone. I've never been under anesthesia, so I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what it was going to be like, but I've always heard that it feels like 5 or 10 minutes. And like I said, it sure did feel like 5 minutes to me. Basically, it was 3 months. I took myself to the ER on September 10th, where they discovered the tumor, and my surgery was December 2nd. And I was also on steroids the entire time leading up to the surgery from September 10th to December 2nd. I took my last steroid the morning of the surgery, and that was to reduce pressure in my head. And the steroids immediately, the day that at the ER when they started me on it, it immediately helped with the aforementioned episodes I was having almost daily. In other words, the dizziness, the weak leg, the foot drop, and the headaches were forever gone. I had it done at the James Wexner at OSU in Columbus, Ohio. I actually had two doctors, Dr. Wu and Dr. Masalek. Dr. Wu was the original doctor that I was referred to from Dr. Patel at Kettering Hospital. Dr. Wu specializes in lower cranial, non-invasive surgery. But he brought in Dr. Masalek because he specializes in ear surgery. And I never asked him why he wanted to have the second neurosurgeon to join him. But who am I to decide? It's two was better than one in this case. They were a power team. They were the most laid-back doctors you'll meet. And both of them made me feel very comfortable and confident that they could do a correct and professional job. An amazing job they did. Also, whoever stapled me up did a fantastic job as well. I had 30 staples, and after having them taken out about 2 weeks later, it looked a little gnarly, but once it healed, I'd say about 2 weeks later, you can barely see the scar that peeks out from under my hair on my neck when I have my hair down. Believe it or not, I didn't worry about dying on the table, but was worried that something would happen that would affect my drumming, at least temporarily, or worse, having a stroke on the table. I was told that there's a small chance that I could have a stroke, so that was definitely on my mind. But again, I just had so much confidence in these two neurosurgeons that I really didn't worry about it too much. Well, the only preparation I had was all the pre-op appointments and tests that they did that was required. Nothing that I did by my own choice, really. And it was early on that I was feeling confident and ready. This was inevitable. So I knew it was going to happen sooner or later, and I wanted it to happen sooner than later because I didn't know what my recovery would look like. Everybody's different. I've never had a surgery. I was having brain surgery, It could take a very short recovery or it could take a very long recovery. I didn't really know, but they say about 6 weeks. Plus, I worked for a tax company, and I knew that tax season was right around the corner, and it was going to be pushing it close to tax season for me to feel better to get back to work. And I didn't want to let my boss down. I'm just that type of person, and I knew that he would need me there to do my job, and I didn't want my recovery to take longer than it, leading us into tax season. So actually the first date scheduled for the surgery was November 18th, 2025. But then when Dr. Wu decided to bring in Dr. Masalek, they were only available together on December 2nd. So that's when the new date was, 2 weeks later from the original, and that's when it happened. 17 hours. I know, that's crazy. The original time was 10 to 12 hours. That's what Dr. Wu told me it would be when I met with him the first time, October 9th. And it's funny because I went into that consultation to meet him thinking that my surgery would probably take 4 or 5 hours. I mean, I literally just pulled that number out of the air, and I had no clue on what it takes to do a surgery like this. I've heard it taking a shorter time for others, so for whatever reason, everyone's a little bit different. But I'd rather them take the time they need versus rushing through it. But when I woke up in ICU the next day, that's when I was told that it took 17 hours. My poor wife, daughter, sister, the 3 that were in the waiting room, the entire time they had to endure that 17 hours. Actually, probably more like 18 to 19 hours when all was said and done, from the time they rolled me back to the time the doctors came out and talked to them at the very, very end when it was complete. But it felt like 5 minutes to me. Oh man, it snowed overnight and the roads were a mess. Salt trucks, plows were not out at that time to clear off the roads. I was supposed to be there at 5:15. We had to drive very slowly to get there. Thankfully, we stayed in a hotel just a couple miles away, so we didn't have to travel too far. But with the snow, it definitely slowed things down. I think we were a bit late, maybe within 15 minutes, but the hospital understood. And the doctors were probably there later than they wanted to be. Anyways, they took me back to the triage, prepped me with an IV and a couple other things, and I said goodbye to my wife, daughter, and sister. And at about 7:40, they rolled me back to the OR and transferred me over to the operating table. And I'd say within 10 seconds, a nurse came up and gave me a mask with oxygen, and she said, "This is just some oxygen." I'm guessing they probably started to administer the anesthesia immediately after they moved me over to the table, because I don't remember having that mask on my face for more than maybe 10 seconds, and I was out. There wasn't even the typical, okay, start counting backwards, like I was expecting. The next thing I knew, which felt like 5 minutes, I was waking up, and there was 3 or 4 people over top of me, and they said, "We're your ICU team." And that was it. I don't know if that actually happened or if I dreamt it, because I don't remember anything after that. It was like I was woken up intentionally by them. They said that, and they walked away, and I fell back to sleep. I don't know. I'm not really sure. As mentioned earlier, waking up in the ICU and having 3 or 4 people standing over top of me saying, "We're your ICU team." That's all I remember. I must have fallen back to sleep right after that. But then at some point during the night, around, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 a.m., I was awake and I was constantly hitting my nurse's button. I had a male nurse that was very attentive to me, and thinking back, I don't even know what I wanted. I was just pushing it and asking something that I just don't remember. And it was something different each time, I think. I felt like I pushed that nurse's button probably a dozen times, and he was finally frustrated with me. And I know he was, because on the My Chart app, there was a place for the nurses to give a comment or a review, and he said something about me being difficult. And that was not the real me. I'm not difficult to work with or needy or a drama queen. But clearly that anesthesia was still in my system, and I was loopy. Yes, I have a really good story. It's pretty quick. At some point, a female nurse came in my room in ICU. She had her hair down, which I think is kind of unusual for a nurse to have her hair down. A nose ring. She had like a septum ring, and she probably would have had to hide that, I would think. And then I'm pretty sure she didn't have scrubs on. I don't know what she did on the other side of my bed, but we must have gotten into an argument, and I don't even know what that argument was about. She reached over and clipped something on my IVs and then walked out. and I was terrified. And I turned to her as she was leaving the room, and I said, "Why are you trying to kill me?" And that next morning, you guessed it, I was still alive. And I told the morning nurse the story, and she goes, "Brian, I could promise you that nobody was trying to kill you." But it felt so real. And I got thinking later that when that nurse that was trying to kill me left the room, she left through a door on the right side, and the door to my room was actually on the left side. So that's when I realized it was just a dream that I had. But man, it felt so real, and like I said, I was terrified that I was going to die. Well, let's see. Half head numbness, like literally straight down the middle. Everything at first was the whole right side of the head. Everything I touched on the right side of my head was numb. Areas since then, in the last 7 months, have let up enough to where it's still numb, but not as strong of a numbness, or it's completely gone away. So it's only in certain areas now. And that numbness actually went into my mouth, including my upper and lower teeth on the right side, and half of my tongue, like literally straight down the middle, half of my tongue. My top and bottom teeth were at first really, really tight and uncomfortable. They felt like they were leaning inward, even though they weren't. Hard to explain this, but that's just what they felt like. In fact, in the hospital the days after surgery, I must have still been loopy because I thought my top teeth were on the bottom and my bottom teeth were on the top. And to make it even weirder than that, I thought some of my teeth were actually coming out of the socket and spinning. I don't know. I kept taking pictures of inside my mouth so I could see what I was feeling. Obviously that wasn't actually happening, but it sure felt that way. And you know, I don't know what they had me on, but it was making me feel loopy. I also have what I call my mush mouth, and it would affect my speech and make me feel very self-conscious. I would slur or have trouble pronouncing certain syllables. I'm kind of dealing with it right now. In fact, sometimes it doesn't come across to others or in video, but I feel it in my just, I don't know, the way my tongue feels, my lips feel. But you know, it's slowly gotten better and better. And at first, I was convinced that it was swelling in the mouth and the tongue, and maybe it was. I don't know. And then for the longest time, I've had bad dry mouth, so I kind of blamed it on that. But after trying some biotin, which has xylitol in it, which is really good for dry mouth, so I hear, it doesn't seem to work for me. It doesn't make a change in my mouth. It tastes really good, minty, but other than that, it doesn't really work. And everyone that told me about it said it works great. It has worked great for them. So I know it works, and now because of that, I think that what I'm feeling, what's causing any mush mouth, is just numbness in my mouth and tongue. I don't always feel like I have dry mouth, and Altoids seem to help when I do. But like I said, I think it's the numbness. Dry lips are another thing that I have been a constant since surgery. So I'm using this all the time, Blistex. Probably, I don't know, I mean, it's all day, every day. Maybe every 15 to 30 minutes I'm taking it, using it on my lips. I've also had some hair shedding in March of 2026. They say it's caused by anesthesia, and it's normal to experience it around the 3-month mark post-op. So it showed up right on time, really. I've hit it with minoxidil, which is it's a spray, which is the same formula, the same active ingredient in Rogaine, and a cocktail of supplements like biotin, iron, vitamin D, and then I also use biotin shampoo and conditioner. So I don't know what's truly working the best and what's not working at all, because I basically started everything all at once, or just, you know, a few weeks apart. I just kind of felt desperate, and I didn't want to try one thing at a time, see what worked, and then, you know, months and months would go by, and, you know, maybe no change would happen. but it's definitely working. And of course, my corneal abrasion is another post-symptom that I'm dealing with. Yes, but before I even had the surgery, I was already deaf in my right ear. For the better part of 7 or 8 years, my hearing was slowly declining. Actually, the first sign of something was on September 5th, 2016. I used to be a wedding DJ, and I remember being at this wedding. I was out in the middle of the room on the microphone, talking to the guests, getting them warmed up before we started everything. And all of a sudden, my right ear, I got a loud piercing sound in it, kind of like tinnitus, but even worse, I think. It took me by surprise, but I kept my cool, kept on talking. Didn't really think much of it, but I should have seen an audiologist not too long after that. I'm thinking that it could have been the first sign of the tumor appearing, starting to grow. But then the next time I noticed that something was odd, I was in the back of a Kroger's grocery store near the meat department in the meat coolers. The fans that were running were actually pulsating, and they should have been like a slow, just a regular hum. They were pulsating, and I just thought, something that needed to be fixed because they were old fans, but in that it wasn't really my hearing. But then at some point at home, I noticed the same pulsating sound on a fan, probably the exhaust fan in the bathroom. But once again, I ignored it and just kept on living my life. And I should have gone to the doctor then, but I didn't. So I'm here to say, once again, listen to your body. And if something doesn't feel normal, doesn't sound normal, whatever, don't just ignore it. Go see a doctor, please. Nothing permanent, but I would say for a few weeks after the surgery, I had a little bit of facial paralysis. Nothing like an angled mouth, like some people unfortunately get. But I could tell my smile wasn't what it usually is, especially looking back on pictures from December. I can definitely see it. Definitely the corneal abrasion, and what that is your cornea, which is the center of your eye, getting scratched during surgery. There are numerous reasons why that could happen. I don't know exactly why mine happened, but it's possible that it was because sometime within that 17-hour surgery, my right eye came open and dried out, or it came open and something rubbed across it, like a surgical drape or something, or both. I don't know. I'm not really sure how that even happens, because they cover your eyes with a gel. They close your eyes and they tape them shut. So even if it came open, I would think that the gel would keep them from drying out for sure. And then even if something was to brush across it, I would think that the gel would still protect it. But I guess I just wasn't so lucky. So ever since, I've been using, actually, well, let me say this. I left the hospital using an antibiotic drop for about 2 months. And then my ophthalmologist put me on a steroid drop for maybe 2 months, and then had me stop. But ever since, I've been using artificial teardrops and ointment, because my eyes do get, my right eye only, does get very dry throughout the day, multiple times. So the artificial eyes, I use Sustain brand. They're nice because anytime I feel my eyes are getting dry, I can put a drop in my eye and get relief. But if you use them like I am frequently, like me, be sure to get the PF kind, which means preservative free. That's safer for your eyes if used frequently. Ointment will last even longer as far as the relief before you need to reapply, but it makes the vision in that eye even more blurry than it already is. By the way, my scratch is right dead center, so that sucks. And they say it can take 6 to 12 months for it to heal. And now that I've got 7 months behind me, there are moments throughout the day where I solo the eye to see what the vision looks like, like this or like that. And it might look better than the rest of the day, but overall it doesn't feel like it's gotten a whole lot better. However, if I could see my vision back in December and January, I would probably say that, oh yeah, it's definitely gotten better. But maybe it's just going to take a full 12 months to heal. My ophthalmologist says that even once it's healed, that I'm not going to have the same vision that I did prior to the surgery, the same clarity. He said that when I came to him in December for the first time, that I was basically legally blind in that eye. So, I don't know what to expect, but hopefully it'll get better by the end of this year. Let's see. As I mentioned, I use Sustain drops and ointment, and I've personally used 2 different kinds of Sustain ointment. One is just a regular preservative-free lubricant eye ointment, and the other is for nighttime. Actually says for nighttime on the tube. It says for severe eye relief, and like there's like a purple strip of color on it, and the regular ointment has an orange strip of color where it says preservative-free. Now you would think that it would be the same formula, but they're actually different. I had bought a 6-pack on Amazon that was supposed to be nighttime, but they sent a regular ointment, and I didn't think anything of it because ointment is ointment, right? Wrong. You really notice when you're putting it in your eye, and I thought that the nighttime ointment was already pretty blurry. I'd already been through a couple of tubes of that, but it's actually the regular ointment is actually thicker, uses a heavier mineral oil and a petroleum balance, I think, which just creates naturally a thicker coating, therefore makes your vision blurrier. So I swapped the use of them once I realized that. So I use the nighttime during the day because it's less blurry, and I use I use it maybe once or twice a day, in the morning and maybe in the afternoon, and then I use the regular ointment during the night because I'm going to have my eyes closed anyways, so it doesn't really matter. And then let's see, these little tubes are tiny, little 3.5 gram tubes of ointment. Oh, also I take the extra liquid from the drop that doesn't stay in your eye. It might drip down your face like tears or just below the eye, and I rub that around the eye. It moistens the skin around the eye, and because it does feel dry around there, so it feels good, and you might have a little bit of shiny skin after that, but the relief will be well worth it. Yeah, it's mostly in my cheek, kind of right here, the corners of my mouth, on my lips, but there's still some areas that are numb on the top of my head, side of the head over the incision site. All of these numb places I can still feel when I touch, but they just feel kind of weird. On the front of the face, kind of that spongy, extra sensitive feeling. And what that is, it's just all the sensory nerves that were cut within the incision, and that's impossible to avoid, so it just creates the temporary numbness. And I'm over 7 months out from surgery and still have some of that numbness, so expect it to last a while. They said up to a year. That seems like it would be a torture would be torture to have to deal with it. But honestly, it's a combination kind of getting used to it, and as it slowly declines, it makes it easier to deal with. Also, I have about an area the size of my hand over the incision site that feels a little weird when I touch it. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't even tickle, it's extra sensitive. It's a strange feeling, kind of like the skin is crawling and moving when I touch it. I know it's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's the only way that I can think of to describe it. And you know, all the sensitive, numb or itchy areas on the head are just the nerves waking up. I'm pretty positive that everyone that has brain surgery experiences some form of this. I will say that one thing that I have read a lot and watched a lot of videos, and I've learned a lot. And if you're watching this and have to have brain surgery yourself, I bet you find yourself researching things. And I think it's definitely a good idea to, you know, look at, but after the surgery. There's just too much scary information on the internet that I personally avoided it before the surgery and vowed to just let the surgeons answer any of the questions I had instead of asking ChatGPT or looking up videos. Yes, definitely. The two biggest ones are nausea and dizziness. I didn't get either of those after the surgery. I had plenty of dizziness before the surgery, but that was from the papilledema that was mentioned, they found early on, which is pressure and swelling on the optic nerves. And that was caused from the tumor pushing on the brain stem, pushing on the eyes. So as I said before, it was all the ripple effect, and that's what got me to go to the ER. Yes, the first thing I found out that they use is something called a Mayfield, which is a head clamp. It's used to keep your head completely still and locked in, because even a millimeter of movement could be detrimental. They're in your head, working around your cranial nerves that affect everything. And if your body was to move somehow, or if they were to bump your head and it would move, it could be the difference between a facial droop or whatever. They never talked about it to me ahead of time, and the next day in the ICU, I noticed that I had scabs in 3 spots, 2 on one side, 1 on the other, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I asked about it, and that's when they told me about the vise. It has sharp points. It actually gets clamped down through your scalp and onto your skull or something like that, and the other end attaches to the table. The other thing was seeing a video of an anesthesiologist prepping you for surgery. This was an actual patient. I didn't know that they actually put gel over your eyes and taped them shut before surgery. Well, maybe I knew about the tape part, but I don't remember hearing about gel over the eyes. But I confirmed it with one of my neurosurgeons at one of my post-op appointments that yes, I did have gel over my eyes. And there's probably other things I didn't realize until after the fact, but those are the 2 things that really stick out to me. Just take your time with it. Be patient. Listen to your doctor's orders and follow them. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I was told that I couldn't lift over 5 pounds for a while. And yeah, definitely I could have lifted more than 5 pounds in reality. But that low weight restriction is to avoid, pressure in your skull, and it's just everything else that's slowly healing. They don't want you to lift anything. So don't be afraid to ask for help or assistance from, anybody that you're around. It's not worth finding yourself back into the hospital because you thought you could do it yourself. Thankfully, that never happened to me. I only had balance issues before the surgery. In fact, I thought the balance issues were from hearing loss, and maybe that was a part of it, but either way, the hearing loss and the balance issues were mostly from the tumor. That was definitely the culprit. The tumor pushed on the brainstem, pushing the whole brain against the optic nerves, causing the papilledema, and the swelling and the pressure, causing the balance issues and vision issues. it was all just a ripple effect. It wasn't bad, but I will say that I watched a lot of videos in my recovery and even before my surgery, but mostly after the surgery. And many of these videos had me crying my eyes out. And it was mostly because I was seeing videos of people who had it way worse than I did, like stage 4 cancer or whatever. And then even some of these things that made me emotional were not even videos. It was finding out that people that I knew, like a friend of mine who has stage 4 cancer, someone with throat cancer, she eventually died. Just horrible things that makes my brain tumor surgery seem like a walk in the park. I'd say somewhere around mid-March or the top of April, I started to feel like my old self. I was back to work after 6 weeks, and that was the middle of January, but I was still slow moving. Well, I'm already there, and that was getting back behind the drum kit. Prior to my December 2nd surgery, the last show that I played was October 24th, and I finally sat behind my drum kit sometime in, I don't know, late February 2026. Now I'm recording a full-length album with my brother, a recording that was actually put on pause after I got the tumor diagnosis. I knew that I couldn't finish it before my surgery, and I would have many months off before getting back to it, and I was worried that my drums sitting that long and then not, and even though they're not touched, would just kind of change the tone of the drums, and then you would hear that on the recording. Plus, after getting that diagnosis, I wasn't in the frame of mind to record, and so I thought it was best to wait, and then hit hard when I returned, which I'm doing now. It's definitely made me appreciate life more, my family and friends more, being part of things that I may not be as interested in doing before. So now I want to be part of everything that I can be, just because we're not promised tomorrow. And I just want to know that I tried my very best to be a part of people's lives. And this might surprise some people that have known me for a long time, but this whole experience has made me more spiritual, just now believing in the power of prayer, and I think something like this really changes a person. It really does. It's going to be okay. You're going to be in good hands between the doctors and all the nurses and God and everyone that's praying for you. You just got to stay positive and know that it may be a little rough after surgery, but you will get through this because you're in pretty good health and you're a trooper and you've got shit to do, so you have no choice. Patience. See what I did there? Patience is the key to post-surgery healing and recovery. By nature, I am not a patient person, and I want things done yesterday, or in this case, I want to be healed and feeling fully back to normal in the same week, but that's just not going to be possible. The body will heal on its own timeline, and if you try to rush it, you just might find yourself back in the hospital. So just be patient. Nothing really, but if I had to pick something, probably the only thing would be sleeping on the good ear. And I heard Mark Ruffalo, the actor, the Hulk, that plays the Hulk, I heard him say the same thing, and so I'm kind of getting my answer from him. But I do agree, sleeping on the good ear, which is my left. I'm a left side sleeper, so with the bad ear out, it causes me to hear silence. Even though I like to hear the sound of a fan for the white noise, but on occasion I'll have to flip to the right side, so it's a much different sleeping experience. Not only because I'm sleeping on numb areas of my head. Doesn't hurt, it just feels weird, with that pressure on the pillow, but actually hearing the fan now. But and the reason why I do that is only because I have to flip over because I get like a hip or thigh ache because getting old sucks. Definitely large crowds, loud rooms with lots of background noise, and being out with friends at dinner. I always have to put myself on the far end of a table with everybody to my left so that I can hear the conversation. Otherwise, it's like putting a wet blanket on a speaker trying to listen to something coming through that, or like, cover your mouth while talking. Did you understand what I said? Covering your mouth while talking. That's what it sounds like. It's just going to be real muffled and distant. So the answers that I gave in this video were my own personal experience. Please know that everyone is different in their recovery, their post-op symptoms, and how they heal. Some unfortunately have it worse than others. I don't know for sure why this is, because I'm not a doctor, but I think a big part of it is a combination of your general health and age. I'm 52, I'll be 53 here in a few months. And overall decent health. It could be better. So just keep a positive attitude. Know that you're going to be in good hands once you find a great doctor. But if you don't feel 100% confident about the first one that you meet with, get a second opinion or interview other doctors before you decide to go the surgery route. Because as they say, surgery isn't always the best choice. For me, it was necessary due to the size of the tumor, the size of a golf ball. Now, if you have any questions, please drop them below and I'll try to answer them the best I can from my own experience. If you have your own story, I'd love to hear it. I love hearing stories, and they're inspiring to me, hearing about post-op symptoms, knowing what other people have gone through, whether it's similar to mine or different, better or worse. I like to hear it. So please share your stories with me, and thanks for watching.